The last briefing was a call to war. And it was only 70% of the picture.
Today, we drop the armor. Welcome to the 100% accuracy update. Here's the non-militant and more science-backed version. I hope it's helpful.
Let's start by correcting a persistent myth, the 21-day or 66-day rule for habit formation. The actual research by Phillippa Lally and colleagues showed that habit automaticity develops over an average of 66 days, but the range was 18 to 254 days. That's not a rule, it's enormous individual variation. More importantly, this timeline applies to one specific type of habit formation: moderate intensity, repeated behaviors in supportive contexts. But your brain has multiple learning systems, and some operate very differently. Today we're exploring a complementary mechanism, one that can accelerate change under specific conditions. This isn't about replacing gradual practice. It's about understanding when intense emotional experiences can catalyze rapid neural restructuring. Critical disclaimer up front: this approach is metabolically expensive, psychologically intense, and appropriate only for specific situations. It's one tool in your toolkit, not your only tool. Your brain has an evolutionary override system designed for survival learning. It's called one-trial learning. And the classic example is the Garcia Effect. If you eat a novel food and become violently ill hours later, you don't need 66 repetitions to learn avoidance. One experience creates a permanent aversion. Why? Because your brain treats this as a survival threat. The mechanism: high-intensity emotional experiences trigger a flood of catecholamines, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine. These neurochemicals act as priority tags, marking specific synapses for immediate strengthening through a process called synaptic tagging and capture. The key insight: low emotional intensity requires high repetition frequency. High emotional intensity can work with low frequency, sometimes just once. But here's what the oversimplified version misses: specificity matters. One-trial learning evolved for concrete stimulus-response pairs. Applying it to abstract behaviors is less straightforward. Context dependency is strong, and individual differences in stress response dramatically affect outcomes. Before we explore the technique, let's be clear about when this approach is and isn't appropriate. Use high-intensity emotional reframing when the behavior genuinely threatens important life goals. You have adequate stress resilience and coping skills. Other approaches have been tried with limited success. You can commit to follow-through and integration. You're not currently in a high-stress period. Do not use this approach if you have a history of anxiety disorders, PTSD, or panic attacks. You're currently experiencing major life stress. The behavior serves an important protective function. You're trying to change normal human needs like rest or connection. You're under 25 as your prefrontal cortex is still developing. Alternative approaches to try first include implementation intentions, environmental design, and gradual exposure. This intensive approach should be your strategic reserve, not your first response. If you've determined this approach is appropriate for you, here's the scientifically grounded protocol. Phase 1. Clarify the functional need. Before trying to eliminate a behavior, understand what need it serves. Distraction might provide mental recovery or anxiety escape. If you don't address the underlying need, your brain will find another way to meet it. Phase 2. Increase emotional salience. The goal is to make the consequences emotionally real, not to induce self-disgust. Instead of visualize yourself as weak, try visualizing the specific, concrete impact of continuing this pattern for 5 years. Make it vivid and sensory, but toward consequences, not toward self-attack. Research shows shame-based motivation increases stress and reduces prefrontal control. Phase 3. Physiological activation. Emotional learning is strongest when accompanied by physiological arousal, but there's a crucial range. The optimal zone is moderate activation, heart rate 90 to 120 BPM. Too low means insufficient tagging. Too high can trigger freeze response. Phase 4. Establish the new pattern. This is where many fail. At the peak of emotional engagement, have your specific alternative behavior ready and execute it immediately. Then, honor the 48 to 72-hour integration period where consistency and sleep are crucial. Let's apply this to a common challenge. Managing focus when you're drawn to distractions. Less effective approach: you're weak, you're wasting your life. This activates shame but doesn't provide a clear alternative. More effective approach? Notice the urge to distract. Pause. Ask, what need is this signaling? If choosing to refocus, visualize your 5-year self who consistently chose deep work. What specific project did they build? How do they feel? Then visualize your 5-year self who consistently chose distraction. What does a typical Tuesday look like for them? Ask, which path are you choosing right now? Not as a permanent identity, but as this specific decision. Then immediately, close the distraction and engage with one small part of your actual task. You're building toward a desired future with concrete imagery, not fleeing a shameful present with abstract fear. Let's look at what empirical research actually demonstrates about these techniques: mental practice and motor learning. Pascual-Leone's work shows mental practice produces similar cortical reorganization to physical practice, with 70 to 90% effectiveness for motor skills. Emotional intensity and memory. Moderate arousal enhances memory consolidation, but high arousal can impair prefrontal function. The relationship is an inverted U-curve, not linear. Aversive conditioning can create strong initial learning, but extinction often requires many exposures and context. Dependency can limit generalization. Self-compassion versus self-criticism. Self-compassion predicts better long-term outcomes across 20+ studies. It increases motivation while reducing anxiety. The synthesis. High-intensity emotional experiences can accelerate initial learning, but sustainable change requires addressing underlying needs, building alternative patterns, and self-compassion during setbacks. This high-intensity approach is one tool among many. Here's how it fits into a complete behavior change system. For habit formation, environmental design is your foundation. Implementation intentions provide structure. Gradual intensity building is the standard approach. High-intensity reframing is a strategic accelerator for key behaviors. For breaking unwanted patterns, functional assessment is always first. Gradual reduction with replacement is the default. Mindfulness builds tolerance. High-intensity intervention is for entrenched patterns used sparingly. The mistake is treating any single technique as the complete solution. The wisdom is matching the intervention to the specific behavior, your current resources, and your individual response patterns. If you choose to experiment with this approach, treat it as data collection, not identity transformation. Before starting, rate your baseline behavior and stress level. Confirm you meet the readiness criteria. During the intervention, note the emotional intensity reached and whether it felt authentic. Did you execute the alternative behavior immediately? After, track for 7 to 14 days. Behavior frequency, urge strength, ease of choosing alternative, sleep quality, and overall well-being. Positive signs include reduced urge strength without increased anxiety and easier execution of the alternative behavior. Warning signs include increased anxiety, sleep disruption, rigid thinking, or social withdrawal. If you see these, discontinue this approach and return to gentler methods. Your subjective experience is valid data. Let's end with what neuroscience tells us about sustainable behavior change. Multiple learning systems work together. 1. The goal-directed system, prefrontal cortex, is conscious and flexible, but energy-intensive. 2. The habitual system, striatum, is automatic and efficient, but rigid. 3. The emotional system, limbic, is fast and powerful. The transition from goal-directed to habitual takes time and follows a logarithmic curve. High-intensity experiences can accelerate the start, but not eliminate the process. Neuroplasticity requires signal, repetition, emotional salience, rest, and novelty. Think of high-intensity intervention as a catalyst in a chemical reaction. It speeds up a process that still needs to occur. It provides a strong initial signal and emotional salience, but cannot replace repetition, rest, or integration. To close, here's how to determine your optimal approach. Start by asking, what's your goal? If building a new habit, is it simple or complex? Simple habits need environment design. Complex skills need deliberate practice. If stress is high, focus on management first. If breaking an unwanted pattern, how entrenched is it? Recent patterns respond to substitution. Entrenched patterns may benefit from intensive reframing. If the function is unclear, identify it first. If you have significant trauma history, work with a professional. Consider your unique factors: high, imagery, vividness, suggests better response to mental practice. High stress resilience allows for more intensive approaches. High perfectionism requires avoiding shame-based methods. The takeaway: effective behavior change is personal. Your job is to experiment systematically and build a customized toolkit that honors both the science and your individual experience. If you want to explore further, here are the actual research foundations. On habit formation, look to Lally et al. And Wood and Runger. On one-trial learning, the foundational work is by Garcia and Colling. On mental practice, Pasquale-Leone studies are essential. On self-compassion, Neff and Germer provide the clinical framework. For accessible summaries, The Power of Habit by Duhigg and Tiny Habits by Fogg are excellent resources. And importantly, if you're working with trauma, anxiety, or compulsive behaviors, please consult a licensed therapist or specialist in CBT, ACT, or EMDR. Here's your final framework. Change happens through multiple pathways. Repetition builds automaticity. Emotional intensity accelerates learning. Both work better with self-compassion. Environmental design beats willpower. Social support enhances everything. Use high-intensity approaches when the behavior threatens important goals, you have resources, and gentler approaches have failed. Always pair intensity with a clear understanding of the need, a concrete alternative, self-compassion, and an integration period. Remember, you're not trying to eliminate your humanity. You're learning to respond more effectively. The goal isn't to become a machine. It's to become a human who understands their own psychology well enough to work with their brain instead of against it. Your brain is not your enemy. It's your partner in growth. Approach change with curiosity, not judgment. With experimentation, not dogma. With self-compassion, not self-attack. That's how lasting change happens.